Welcome to Interviews from the Multiverse. I'm Robert Willing, StarCraft, and with me I have my special guest, Douglas Ernst. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you for coming on. Now, any of you who are noticing that there's two of me in the chat, my mic's been acting up, so I'm talking from my phone right now. So, it's the return of the double Robert. If anyone's seen the my prior stream, so Doug, since you're the guest here, why don't you talk about yourself? Who you are, what you've done, how you've gotten into this whole community?
Sure. So my day job, I work for a newspaper in Washington, D.C., but then after I get off at night, after I get off of work, then I usually will go straight into YouTube. But like roughly a decade ago, I started a WordPress blog where I sort of wrote on the intersection of politics and popular culture. And some of that, not all the time, but I sort of delved into comic book reviews, typically The Amazing Spider-Man. I concentrated on Dan Slott's run for the most part. And at some point in time, I wanted to reach more people, so I went into YouTube, started my channel, and kind of the rest is history from there. So most people that are tuning in now, they'll probably know me from a YouTube channel.
All right. Now, long you been into his comic books? Just a rough time, like your first comic, all of that. Like, what draws you into comics?
Sure. I've said on other streams, I literally learned to read on comic books. My brother would sort of sit me on his lap on a chair in our family room when we were little, and he would read Spider-Man and Iron Man comic books to me. Then from there, I had another brother. He was big into X-Men and Daredevil. And so when we got old enough, we would all sort of everyone got a different comic, and so we would just kind of exchange them. We'd have like a little allowance money or whatever from doing chores. And so that way we got to read more books because we would kind of pool them together and then read, because I couldn't afford all of them. And so I was basically a Marvel kid my entire life.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, for me, I've mostly been a DC guy, but I've always, as I like to say, I had a summer home at Marvel. It's how I look at it. I always pop in and visit. But okay, now, so let's dive right in now to the main thing. Your story, Soulfinder. What's it about exactly?
Sure. So Soulfinder is a story about a major order of exorcists, and they take on evil that most people they will never encounter. They will have no sort of conception of what it is, even most priests, even most exorcists. And the way that you get recruited into this particular order is that you have to be a combat veteran, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to have been on the battlefield, seen the horrors of war, come out of it with your faith intact, and then along the way, you're recruited for this major order.
Oh, that's nice. So the guy from Dead Alive probably wouldn't be in there or would he? I kick ass for the Lord guy.
Yeah, so well, this particular tale is about a priest named Father Patrick Redder, and it's
Mm-hmm.
actually his introduction into the order.
Ah.
He initially is kind of hesitant about it, and
Mm-hmm.
he kind of doesn't want to get involved really for the most part. He just wants to continue doing his thing, but he gets in over his head. There's a cult that are dedicated to this demon named Blackfire and Blackfire's minions, I guess I should say, although usually we refer to him by his Greek name, but don't ask me to pronounce it because I will totally botch it. But the translation is right. I know that because my landlord is actually from Greece. So
Ah.
I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, did I say this right?" And he's like, "Blackfire, is that what its name?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, that's cool." And then I was like, "How about this one?" And he's like, this translates to somebody who is paid by the devil to do really bad things. And I was like, okay, close enough. It's devil's mercenary. And
Oh, that's
so
nice.
so he's like, oh, yeah, that works. That's definitely basically what it translates to. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got the two Greek words that I was looking for correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. That is good to hear. So, and now this going to be a done in one, or do you plan on making this an ongo? Do more with them, or what's your plans for this book or this series?
This particular story is 56 pages, and then we actually have 8 pages of bonus material. There'll be a lot of additional artwork. So Timothy Lim is my artist. Brett
Mm-hmm.
R. Smith is our colorist. Dave Dorman did 2 covers for us.
Ooh.
And Matt Weldon so far has actually done 3 additional pieces of original artwork. And so that will all be in the supplementary material. There'll be sort of, you could see like the concepts, Tim's early concept art for Patrick Redder. There's another priest called Reginald Crane, and there's an officer named Gregory Chua. And so you'll see that. I'll also write an afterword. I have to get on that. I was going to do it this weekend, but I didn't get around to it. But this story basically sets up, by the end of it, Father Redder becomes a soul finder, and you could kind of see, particularly at the climax, what this universe, all the possibilities that it entails. And I would like to continue to tell stories. I'd like to release another graphic novel in 2020 if possible, and I'll just keep going. I know Brett wanted to do a prequel that takes place during Vietnam, so I think around September I will begin writing at least one story, but I might simultaneously be doing 2 at the same time. We'll see. I got to do some research.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Now, Tim Lim's your artist. Now, a lot of what you described, the Dorman, Brett, and Tim, feels like it's minus Chuck Dixon, basically the Trump Space Force team. So, what got you into working with Tim?
Tim and I met early on. I'm actually losing track of time, but I know Tim was basically doing the rounds on all the different YouTube channels very early on as they were sort of building. This is before quote unquote Comicsgate sort of blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere along the line, we just started talking, and I think I basically had him on one of my streams, and then afterwards, I'm sure you're familiar with this. You know, people hang out either before and afterward. They talk about stuff,
Yep.
and we started. I found out that he was Catholic, and so we're both Catholic guys, and we started talking about stuff like that. And then eventually, I ended up calling him on the phone, and we would talk about not even comic books really. We were just talking about faith-based stuff, and somewhere along the line, he basically said that he had a very similar idea to mine, which would eventually become Soulfinder. It was initially called, early on, I was just calling it Exorcist 79, the Blackfire Suicides. And so, but that obviously it changed. So I think you're the first channel where I actually mentioned an early title, a tentative
Ooh,
title. But so that went through a bunch of changes for numerous reasons, including legal reasons.
obviously.
And so that changed. But anyway, so we just kind of hit it off in terms of philosophically and spiritually. And I was just like, yeah, if you want to work together, that would be cool. And he was the one who sort of pitched the idea, the concept to Dave Dorman. I think it was over dinner. Maybe they were down in Texas, like I want to say like maybe Bell County Comic Con. I'm not 100% sure on that. And then Dave was just like, yeah, that sounds cool. And I have enough advance notice. So he did 2 covers for us, and I love them. And then I met Tim down in Orlando in October to basically show him that I was serious. I was willing to put my money where my mouth is. And so he was in Orlando with Mark Pellegrini
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and I flew down to Orlando, and it was like a pseudo business, pseudo personal vacation sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I
That's
gave him the script.
nice, nice. So, dude, trying to think about what else to ask. So what were some of your inspirations for this? Like any movies or anything in particular, any type of comic books or whatnot?
The weird thing about this story, people were like, oh, well, you should watch this movie, you should watch that movie, or they were saying all sorts of stuff about like horror films, and they were
Mm-hmm.
asking me if I was watching all sorts of Exorcist movies and this and that, and I was like, I actually don't really watch a lot of horror movies. I don't even watch like other than the classic like The Exorcist or whatever. For the most part, I don't really get into that, but I've read a lot of books that deal with the subject matter. And so the inspiration for the story itself was really along the lines of, okay, I'm sick of the comic book industry as it is right now, telling these tales where I don't know who's good, who's bad. They're basically all sort of bad guys. You might have
Yeah.
anti-heroes. So I wanted a clear line, a delineation basically between good and evil. And one way to do that was to have a hero go up against demonic elements that are from hell.
You can't get more
There's
evil than that.
yeah, there's no mistaking that these are evil beings or whatever. And also because they're demons, they're extremely powerful, they're extremely intelligent. I didn't want to have a superhero in this. Yeah, I wanted it to be just a man, just a regular dude, and who is fallible, who can be hurt, who could be injured, who I could essentially put him through the gauntlet and do all sorts of stuff to him to test him physically, mentally, spiritually, all that sort of stuff. And to me, if you could have a normal man who could find a way to do heroic things going up against a demon, that would be pretty cool in my mind. And so we'll see what the readers think. But I thought it was a good dichotomy. And it also, in many ways, as I've said on other streams, this is sort of the culmination of roughly a decade of being unsatisfied with the comic book industry as it is.
Well, actually, that's a perfect transition into with the current state of comics. I mean, well before Comicsgate, let's be honest, it was a slow boil for a while, and then it just went from slow to boom almost within a 1 year. What, as a comics fan, what was it like for you observing that, just seeing things start to slowly get off the rail before going off into another track?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because these days I think back to the very early days of my blog, which I want to say was like maybe 2008 or late 2008, maybe early 2009. And there were these sort of like warning signs, and I was writing about them, and that's where I met Captain Frugal, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's another guy, Nate Winchester. I met him, Dave Huber, Avi Green, all these sort of guys. And we would randomly, before some of us were kicked off of the boards, different websites, the pros and others would say, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just making stuff up. You're just a very, very small percentage of the readership. You don't know what you're talking about. And we were saying, no, there's basically thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that are alienated from what's happening here. And so, like you said, it was a slow boil almost, or it was almost like when things go wrong with your computer, there's all sorts of things that are going on in the background, and maybe like slowly things are like screwing up or whatever. I'm not a analyst. Or
No, I know what you mean.
anything.
I know what you mean. I'm a computer guy, and I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Like,
and then all of a sudden at once, it just like spirals out of control, and boom, your computer crashes or whatever.
exactly.
And that to me is almost what happened with quote unquote Comicsgate, Team Comics, Independent Comics. There's all this stuff that was going on underneath the surface, and eventually it reached a tipping point, and boom, it just exploded.
Exactly. I mean, personally, from my own examples, I've always, like, I'll be honest, I was always on and off with comics, got very into it in around 2003 once I got into college and I comic book store near me. But I've always been following comics. But with me, I'm always a guy who can just accept things. I'm an easygoing guy. Heck, I still enjoy Tom King's work, even though I'm reaching my own stressing point. But the fact that even someone like me, who's been able to see some of the stuff and be like, what the hell are they doing to these characters, should speak volumes for some of these creators and all that. But I think, I'm pretty sure you probably agree with this. The bigger issue isn't even so much the writing, so much as the creators doubling down has been the bigger issue. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, there's so many different facets of what is wrong with the comic book industry, and yeah, the doubling down and just the outright unprofessionalism showed towards customers who. There was the article on CBR the other day about there should be turn Peter Parker gay or whatever. And so historically, we'll just go back. You could go back in time, Gay Iceman, or go back in time with all these sorts of things where a fan would say, you know what, like, I don't think that's right to do to Peter Parker. If you want to just create in the multiverse a gay Peter Parker somewhere or something like that, but it's not the Peter Parker, like, whatever. But I think we're going down a bizarre road here. Like, but the creators over the past however many years, they would be like, well, that's just because you're a bigot or whatever.
Hey, ever
And
since the election, yeah.
yeah, and it's that sort of thing where if they could have just not done that sort of thing, they were just pouring gasoline on the fire because
Mm-hmm.
people were already ticked off with these sort of the disrespect for continuity and the
Yeah.
constant reboots and all this sort of stuff. And then when you insult somebody who is upset for a logical reason, like, then you're just compounding the problem.
No kidding. Now, I would also say this is that I also noticed not just in and around the comics book gate, but even all of so many other communities, like say web YouTube and all that stuff. Like you have your Linkaras and things like that. How back when it was during or these comic podcasts, back when Obama was in charge, perfectly fine. They seem to be more on the agreement side. They would point out their problems and be like, "Oh yeah, you can have a civil conversation with them." Trump gets elected, all of a sudden they double down and get into the progressive wokeness, all hot and heavy. And then anyone that usually has a reasonable discussion with, now it's, oh, you're just like drum fed all that. It's like, what the heck happened just because of an election, right?
Exactly.
I mean, because I know that with Linkar especially. I just saw his recent stuff where he admits, like, oh yeah, I used to be an idiot talking smack about what happened with Cassandra Cain, being reasonable, but he's saying, but then there's the toxic fandom. I'm like, dude, you're just trying to cover your ass so you can then say but. And sure enough, he said but, and then he makes why his viewpoint's an exception. It's like, dude, you can't have both ways. Sorry, I
Yeah,
just
no,
needed to
you're
get
pretty
that
much
out.
on point, man.
Yeah, so now with Comicsgate books or Indiegogo books in general, what have you put money down for, and which ones have you received and actually read and enjoyed?
Sure, no problem. So, I mean, I guess I could just run through a list of stuff real quick, but last year I was a little bit hard up for cash for numerous reasons. I was moving across the country and my wife was in between jobs and all this kind of stuff. But without getting into the personal stuff, I
Right.
backed, obviously, Jawbreakers Lost Souls last
Mm-hmm.
year. I backed Red Rooster, Trump Space Force, Cyber Frog. And then when I'm losing track of time here, but there's Professor Geek's Tales from the Stacks,
Mm-hmm.
Monster MD, Downcast Wall Might, The Case of the Littlest Umbrella, Offworlder, Hero, Blood of the Patriots. There was
Mm-hmm.
Alterna's, their comics expansion. I did back that. The Ferryman 2, Relic Shadows of Light, Caius, A Story of Blood and Stone, Legends of the Lone Wolf, Earthworm Jim, Blind Fortress, Extractors, and then Jawbreakers, God King. I actually backed that a couple days ago. And
Nice.
so obviously I did receive Jawbreakers and then Timothy Lim's books as well.
Right.
Actually Trump Space Force I got. Walmite. I know other people are receiving it, but
I did.
yeah, I'm jealous of everybody. I've not received mine yet, but I know what people are getting theirs.
Now, was there ever any of the Indiegogo books you wanted to get but didn't? I mean, I'm sure there's a
Uh,
lot, but any in particular, like standouts?
yeah, I know I've seen the Shinobi Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
I have not backed that. I don't know how much longer it's open for. I probably
I
should
don't know either.
circle back and do that. Yeah, there was just so many. And then I apologize. You know,
You don't have to. You don't have to.
there's been some good looking stuff where it's just like at the time I was just like, I only have so much disposable income that I could.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then it gets, and that's actually with Soulfinder. We wanted to basically get the price point as low as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
um, for us, how do I say this? Walmart on that one, Tim was actually kind of doing an experiment in terms of the number crunching to see how
Mm-hmm.
low we could get things for Soulfinder. So our lowest perk actually is the clergy tier, clergy, and that is actually at $15 plus. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was like it's $8 for
Shipping.
shipping,
Yeah.
and I think that's a pretty good deal for a
Oh yeah.
56-page story and then 8 pages, 64 total. And we're gonna have the square binding and
Oh nice.
the paper stock and all that. People that are into that sort of stuff, in terms of making sure Brett R. Smith's work sort of pops off the page.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have Brett do this awesome color work and then like basically have the printers like do it where it was like, oh, you can't
Oh,
even
I know.
see all the stuff that he did. So
And that's been the good thing about when it's Tim Lim's books and stuff. All the colors always pop, especially when it's Brett's colors.
yeah, and so when I was talking to Tim about it and Brett as well, I was like, I don't care what I have to pay for, just get me the highest quality book that you could get aside from a hardcover like a Bigfoot Bill.
Right.
But my goal, my ideal is to basically be the best quality book itself, the actual printed material and all that, aside from Bigfoot Bill.
I think you're already on the way there because already from what you're describing, it basically sounds like it's the condition of Trump Space Force, but with the price point of Walmart.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because Trump Space Force actually had the square binding and all that, whereas Walmart did not. So yeah. So now as far as with how again what you brought up earlier with gay Spider-Man and all that stuff, has there ever been a case where you hear about some of these woke changes and you feel like, hey, there is potential here if they did this, they did it this way? Do you ever feel like there's some good merits to some of these progressive ideas? They're just made so ham-fisted, or do you think it's horrible ideas all around?
Yeah, so with most of these ideas, there's usually a way that if you were wanted to be subversive or whatever, and you wanted to get from point A to point Z, there's ways to go about doing it, but it takes time to do it
Mm-hmm.
naturally where people will actually buy into it. And even something like, we'll just say Riri Williams.
Yeah.
She was the well, one, they could have Rhodey had his what was it, his cousin or
Niece or
whatever.
something, I think.
Yeah, she would have been the logical choice to
Right.
basically be the protege of Tony Stark. But so they ditched that, and then they just
Well, because
created.
Bendis couldn't get any royalties from now, let's be honest.
Yeah, so the logical idea to have a Tony Stark protege, they did not do that, and that would have been a young black woman or whatever that could have basically gone into the role and maybe not necessarily become Iron Man full time or whatever, but you would have set the stage where like, okay, this makes sense. This is fine. Like nobody cares. Like when Rhodey he took over for Tony in the 80s or whatever, and I read that, and when I was a kid, and my brothers read it, and nobody like it just flowed more naturally. But
I think what helped there was that Michelini and Layton never wanted Rhodey to wear the armor, but then when they left, you had other creators come in and like, we have this good character, let's just put him in, and it actually worked because you had another creative team built the character up, which I think
yeah,
has been one of the issues. Sorry.
no, and it's to me, it just seemed like a like maybe I'm biased or whatever, or my ideas are clouded by my youth or whatever, but everything just seemed like a natural progression to me as a kid with that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
agree.
but these days, it's just Iceman suddenly, boom, we basically snap our fingers, and he's
You're
his
gay.
mind. Yeah, it's like Jean Grey sort of says like, "Oh, you're gay," and it's like,
And if I
"Oh,
remember
okay."
right, weren't they originally going to say was only young Bobby's gay, old Bobby can still be a ladies' man, be straight? But then they say later, like, nope, they're both gay.
Yeah, they're doing all sorts of weird stuff, and so it's just one of those things where, like I said, there's ways to do things that are organic to the story itself, but usually that'll take a good couple of years to work up to it. But under Axel Alonso, they were
Aye.
just left and right, just doing weird stuff for wokety woke points or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Virtue signals, yeah.
Yeah, and that doesn't work. And they did too much too soon. They were just like at a really fast clip going through all the iconic characters.
Or they took a character that was already built up. Actually, people were liking America Chavez, and then they ruined her.
Exactly. So, and that
Yeah,
was one where people would come to me and say, like, actually, if you read the before Gabby Rivera came in, if you read those, there was nothing wrong with America Chavez, and
exactly. Or if you read Ultimates,
right,
yeah.
and so it was one of these things where it's the job of the writer. A good writer can do wonders with
Mm-hmm.
a storyline, and even if there is a ton of damage done to a character, if you get a really good writer on board, they could go a long way towards healing those wounds, basically. But these days, Marvel's just sort of filled with these partisan creative termites, basically.
Although the irony is that Nick Spencer, not that great with Captain America, but he's doing what you just described for Spider-Man after what Dan Slott did. That's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Nick Spencer, I've always said that he is technically, he's definitely a better writer than Dan Slott. Dan
Yeah.
Slott's a good idea man, but his execution of stories, particularly the conclusions of stories, to me usually fell flat. Whereas Nick Spencer, even though I'm not a fan of the way that there was a couple years there where he was just saying a lot of mean things about
Yeah.
customers. That's actually why I haven't reviewed any of the Spider-Man books. I did like a pseudo review once
Mm-hmm.
early on, but he just turned me off so much in terms of his interactions with customers years ago that I was like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to give this guy a platform. I'm not going to spend an extra 2.5 hours of my free time after work giving him attaboys and pats on the back when he never apologized for saying that it's a myth that there could be a good Republican out there
Oh,
and that basically all Republicans are quote unquote evil and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, okay, well, you're better with Spider-Man than Dan Slott. I'll give you that. But at the same time, I'm not going to go out of my way to champion your work.
right. Perfect. That's perfect. You're right. And to be honest, I haven't bought any of those books. The only Marvel book I buy these days are Runaways, and even then, that's more out of loyalty now than anything else. But I will say this though with Dan Slott, he used to be a good idea guy. His She-Hulk run, the Thing, and all that. Those were good books, and you can see why he got Spider-Man. Just once you gave him the thing he treasured most of all, yeah, he basically started doing whatever the hell he wanted.
Yeah, and that actually, I think what basically happened with Dan, I've always said that Dan's really pretty good when he's on a short leash. When he's
Mm-hmm.
got editors, like early on in his career, he obviously did not have the creative leeway to do anything he wanted. They were a little bit more on top of him. But as time went on and all these guys became buddy buddy and the editors got weaker and weaker and weaker, he was allowed to just basically bite off more than he could chew, and he had all these ideas swirling around in his head.
Oh yeah, the
But then,
Reckoning War.
yeah, it basically felt as if he was doing so much, and then all of a sudden, oftentimes he'd be like, "Oh, crap! I have to like wrap this up real quick," and he didn't know what to do, and then it would just
Yeah.
be like a really rushed ending.
Or leave it for someone else to deal with.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like it took Nick Spencer to finally resolve the Grim Hunt after how long of people leaving. It's like, oh, I brought Craven back. Who wants him? Anyone? Anyone? Sure, a few people use him, but then it was like made it useless. At least Spencer put him in the back in the ground properly,
Right.
which I will give Spencer that because I gotta say, Craven's Last Hunt, one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, and yeah, what a disgrace the Grim Hunt was.
Yeah, these I think really Marvel is not going to be able to heal for the most part until you have to get rid of the people at the top that are the problems, the Tom Brevorts. I,
I think though Hickman's doing a good Hickman coming back. Yeah, I got some stories to say about that. I think he's going to bring kind of like what Bendis has brought his people over to DC. I think Hickman's bringing the right people over to Marvel.
yeah, well, actually, speaking of DC, I first, like I said, I was a Marvel guy my entire life, and then with Rebirth, I actually started to dip my toes into like the DC waters, and I was kind of liking what I was reading. And then as soon as I knew that Bendis was going over to DC, I was like, uh-oh.
Believe,
Uh,
yeah,
and
Ben.
I bailed basically just knowing that he was going over there. And then I watched Professor Geek's channel whenever I get a chance, and actually Thinking Critical with Wes, and those guys just ripped they will rip Bendis and DC to shred these days. And I was like, well, I'm glad I jumped ship because
Because
Bendis has way too much power.
he does, and the funny thing is that it's because of him that Hickman bailed on DC. He was coming to DC. They were working and stuff. In fact, Grant Morrison's Green Lantern was supposed to be Hickman's Green Lantern, from what a friend of mine told me who went to one of these who actually talked to Hickman himself. And it turns out the reason why is Hickman didn't want to work with Bendis because he was so fed up with Bendis. Just Hickman would set up something, and then Bendis would quickly overturn it and reverse it so haphazardly that he's like, fuck it. That's why he left DC and Marvel in the first place. And then when he found out Bendis was coming to DC, he's like, forget you. Hey, Marvel, you want me back? And now he's doing the X-Men. Let's see if even he can salvage that. But yeah, with Bendis, I mean, Bendis has a few good ideas, I still say, but his writing is like Action Comics has been, I think, the only good thing he's done, and that's barely because he's still been doing the grounded stuff. It's like he has good ideas, but then you look at Superman when he's trying to do big epics. He's never, even at Marvel, he could never do a good big epic ever.
Right. Yeah.
Name me one.
Towards the end of his time at Marvel, I was just like, this guy is uninspired for the most part. He seems burnt out.
Except for Dr. Doom, I think.
Yeah, I did hear some good things about that. But his work on Iron Man, which then led into his stuff on Riri Williams, although they still called it Iron Man, I was just like, this is really bad. This is embarrassingly bad. It's like he's just phoning it in, and there isn't an editor to kind of stand up to him and say like, all right, dude, this is subpar work. You need to up your game. I don't care if your name is Brian Michael Bendis. Hopefully, did we lose you there?
No, I'm still here. It's just a little bit of distraction around the house.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I know exactly what you mean, and yeah, it just feels like especially when Bendis came on, and they brought him in because he can find and bring talent. And I gotta say, for example, Kelly Sue DeConnick, her Aquaman run started off good. Now look at it. It's like, I knew it was too good to last. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the other thing with some of these sort of ideologue creators is every once in a while they'll get like one or two stories, and then people are like, because you want to believe that they could turn it around.
Yeah.
But then eventually,
especially when you hear Jeff Johns vouch for her.
Yeah, and then eventually the truth basically comes out.
Yep, and now look at how Aquaman is. He's basically all like doughy love vibe for Mira and all that. And it's like, what the hell? You're not even trying to do the movie Aquaman. You're just doing some cucked version of Aquaman. What the hell? But
yeah, no, I definitely can't speak with any authority on DC. I just know what Wes at Thinking Critical and Professor Geek has said, and I'm like, if you lost those two guys, then I know for sure that I wouldn't be into what you're doing. So I've stayed away. But if you tell me it turns around sometime in the next 6 months, I might give them a second look.
Yep. But now between me and those guys, I will say this: those guys are so quick to want to blame the deal for everything, and rightfully so. I am not a fan of the deal anymore like I used to, but at the same time, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm still one of those who says that right now is still not the right time to get rid of him, because you get rid of him unless Jim Lee's given the main spot total, which I think he still needs to collaborate to help him out with. I don't think DC could they'll probably get someone else that'll replace the deal but be more woke and make things even, it seems to be on a slow spiral. You replace the deal, you'll probably get someone who's going to accelerate it.
Yeah, you're in this weird sort of catch-22 situation with some of these guys, and it's just sort of sad that this is where we're at in 2019.
Exactly, especially with the house that one could say Superman built,
Exactly.
and he's been. But now here's another question. Growing up, was there ever any comics that you've read that weren't traditional comics, but you always loved and adored? Like for me, for example, I love Mouse. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the first sort of. My brother, he was big into. He's a lot older than I am,
Mm-hmm.
but he was big into like Germany, and he loved like World War II history, learning about it, all that sort of stuff. He took German in high school, literally like did the foreign exchange student stuff, and so yeah, he had that as well, and that was one of the early comics that I read that really resonated with me. And that was something where it's like, oh, comic books can actually, they could be a lot more than most people think that they are. And so there's another book that's along similar lines called Pyongyang.
I think I heard of
And
that. Yeah.
and it's all about this French animator. It's his actual trip into North Korea. I think he spent like 6 or 8 months there doing animation work.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came back, he basically made a comic into it, and it was just really super cool comic book. His name is Guy. I can't speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's
No, no,
like
I don't. I get you.
Delisle, or I can't pronounce it right, but it's
No,
it's
I get what you're saying.
Pyongyang,
Yep.
and it's one of those things where sometimes people that don't know anything about comics that I run into, that I talk, they're just like, oh, comics, and I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about. It's just
Yeah.
visual, like sequential art storytelling. It could be actually it's like you people watch movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like how is like obviously the frame rate and all that kind of stuff, it's like
Oh yeah.
faster. You watch animated movies that make you cry or whatever. Anyone that's watched, was it Up, the first like
Yeah.
5 minutes of Up
Oh.
with the old
Yep.
man and
Yep.
his
Definitely.
wife passing away and all that kind of stuff. It's like it'll bring tears to your eyes. And but for some reason, people, they cannot get it in their mind that a comic book can be just as powerful.
Agreed. Definitely agreed on that. It's just like, I mean, I see because through some comics, like I'll just say this: there's one comic. It's a recent one, but it's still, even though I know how the story ends and everything, it still gets about pulls up. It just punches me in the gut. It was the second issue of Peter Tomasi's build up towards Detective Comics 1000, where spoiler alert, even though it doesn't turn out to be that way in the end, Leslie Tompkins gets killed, but everything about the artwork, the writing, everything just felt like it felt strong, and you're just like, you for a moment you think they really did it, and you're like, no, no, and then just you read it and I still well up looking at it again, even though I know otherwise, that still gives me that impact.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, having gone through the process of creating a comic book now for my first time, I mean, I always had ideas of what it might be like, but I appreciate it so much more. Even the creators that I in the past I've criticized, like someone like a Dan Slott, I appreciate their work much more now, because you can see you have to be firing on all cylinders. You have the colorist, you have the artist, you have the letterer, you have the writer, and everybody has to essentially be on the same page. And to be able to get everybody in sync on this one sort of vision for a story, and then actually have it like be a good story on top of
Mm-hmm.
everything else, and then have the art be really solid and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of I've said like almost like a minor miracle that any collaborative work ever gets made.
Tell me about it. I have my own fictional stuff. I still want to do my own comic one day. I do have a friend of mine who I've actually gotten back into contact with. He wants to work on stuff. I have another friend who'd help me out if I need him to. And I hope I'm doing my own thing where what started off as fan fiction eventually started creating all these original characters. And then I took the fan fiction characters, turned them into my own characters. And then I have this long form series. Like I have multiple series I could come up with out of it all. And I just feel like just by coming up with some of the stuff, it's probably already got me into the idea of what it's like to work on in comics. And probably why I have a different insight than others. You know what I mean? Well, I mean,
Right.
obviously you do.
Yeah, no, the whole process has been very interesting, and I mean I can't even lie, when I see the first time experiencing, I have the script and I turn it over to someone like Tim or even a Dave Dorman, and you have this idea of what things should look like. And then what was in your mind suddenly appears on a page, and it's oftentimes either like a near perfect rendition of what was in your mind. Maybe they even improve upon what was in your mind or whatever. It's hard not to get like a little sort of like almost lump in your throat or something where you're just like, wow, this is actually all coming together. This is so cool. Because everybody else has their own challenges in their life. There are things going on. Maybe people have family members that are old or sick or whatever, or they have financial issues and they're trying to take care of that. They have other jobs, other projects, and to have everybody like focused on your vision for literally like almost a year to get it from the script phase to actually shipping it out to customers. It just fascinates me.
Oh, I agree. I mean, in my case, I've not written anything. Again, all my ideas are just up in my head, but I've always gone to conventions with my one friend's sketches to pros and have them do commissions for me. And sometimes I get stuff where I show, like, one funny thing is I have my big alien villain. And whenever I take it to artists and they draw it, they always give them a mask because of how my friend's design looks. It looks like there's a mask on, and I'm always like, "Ay!" You know what I'm saying? But one guy, Norm Rapman, he's usually a inker, but he's done artwork and he did colors as well. He took it and he actually made it work. Instead of having it be a mask, it was like a birthmark right across his eyes. And I'm like, holy shit, I never thought of that. But that is perfect. I am keeping that. And it's just one of those cases where you would do, and I'm just wondering if that, I hope to get that experience properly when I get this off the ground eventually, because that was one of the biggest ones. That, and when I had Ron Friends draw one of my hero characters who has a lot of Spider-Girl influence into it, that is still one of my favorite commissions I ever had. And you know what I'm saying, right? You just see it there, especially when it's done by the person that was one of your biggest influences for the character. And you're
Right,
just like,
right.
that'd be like if you had a character that's like the Thing, and if Kirby was alive, he drew it.
Right. And well, that's basically how it was with my cover for Soulfinder and Dave Dorman. I grew up reading,
The Star
seeing
Wars
his
books and all
artwork
that.
in the 90s, especially
Yeah.
the Star Wars stuff. And then to see him actually do like 2 covers, like I was just like, this is like a dream. This is
Yeah.
so surreal to have this happening.
And I've met him at least once. I've met him at C2E2. Had him even sign my Trump Space Force. And yeah. But I will just say this. Now, actually, funny you say talk about with Star Wars. How big of a Star Wars fan are you?
So yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't want people to like rake me over the coals or whatever. But it's one of those things where I definitely love the original trilogy. When I was a kid, I read like the Timothy Zahn
Oh, I
stuff,
love those. I love those.
and I liked the Dark Horse stuff in the '90s. But I didn't really get into like, how do I say it? The prequels. I felt we'll just say disappointed in. I felt like there was a lot of missed opportunities. We'll just put it that way.
Agreed. I'm not going to argue on that.
And then the new films, I was willing, with like J.J. Abrams and his little mystery boxes or whatever, I was willing to cut him some slack. But then after Johnson, after what he did,
Ruin Johnson.
yeah, I don't know. Like I've never gone to conventions that are just for Star Wars, or I don't live and breathe. I don't do cosplay as Star Wars
I don't
stuff.
either.
But I think that I've seen, particularly the original trilogy. It's one of those things where I don't even know how many times I've seen like Empire.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't know. I would say my love for the most part is attached strongly to the original trilogy, but I was willing to give JJ a chance and see where he went with, or where Kathleen Kennedy was going to go. But then it turns out, oh, they didn't even have like any sort of cohesive idea for the trilogy or whatever.
Well, technically they did, but then they decided, Ryan's like, I have a better idea.
Right. And you're like, you can't
You can't do
literally
that.
billions of dollars are at stake, and you're just gonna let like this guy's zigging, you're gonna allow that guy to totally zag with a
And why
billion
do you
dollar
think? Sorry.
no, with $1 billion franchise, it's crazy.
Exactly. And then when you have the other guy who's going to take over, the guy who did Jurassic World, he leaves. They throw him under the bus. They make. I still remember there was news stories saying how he was a pain in the ass to work with. The only reason why Jurassic World, no one complained with Jurassic World, was because Steven had picked him. Which of course, what did they say about Steven Spielberg then if he was an asshole, right? The guy was an asshole, right? It's like, and yet nowadays you don't even hear that anymore. People have been hushed up. Sorry, dogs. And you have stuff like that, but it's like even he saw it. Mark Hamill has seen it. You have all these people seeing it. You even have the new actors seeing it, and yet no one cares. When even
Right.
your new actors are having issues, like the Raylo fans, good lord, I feel bad for those two actors. Don't you?
Yeah, they've totally gone. Everything is off the rails, and I don't know. I'm just whether it's Star Wars or even with the MCU, I'm very I'm not enthusiastic about where things are going.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'll say this with the MCU, I'll be seeing sometime next week Spider Man. But after Spider Man, they have to earn my butts in the seat. And I'm sorry, after Captain Marvel, if they end up, if that ends up being the traditional writing standard from now on, where, the bad guys aren't really bad guys, they're just there for the hero or heroine to kick the ass of and nothing else. And there's not really a story, just constant empowerment for whatever minority. I don't want any part of it, no matter what characters they use.
Yeah, no, after I'm basically in the same boat as you. I will see this Spider-Man movie. I'll
That's my
probably see it.
epilogue.
Yeah, in a week or two, something along those lines. My wife wasn't really that thrilled about it, so
Mm-hmm.
she's like, if you want to go by yourself, you could go or whatever. So I might go and see that, but then, like you said, after that, I don't have the same feeling that I did early on in the MCU,
Nope.
where I would literally every like opening weekend, I was always there, if not
Yeah,
opening
same here.
night.
I only missed one of the movies, and that was Thor: The Dark World, and that's still my least favorite.
Yeah, that's another one where I saw that
Captain
maybe
Marvel is better than that still.
I saw Dark World, maybe not opening night, but I think I saw it the opening weekend.
Yeah, and I still say again, Endgame salvaged it to a degree, but I still say it was the most boring and unnecessary, except for the Stone stuff, movie out of the whole franchise up to that point.
Yeah, well, actually, Captain Marvel was the one that I literally did not see that movie. Um, and I know a lot of people did, and they were so all
It,
at that particular time before YouTube changed their algorithms, I should say. Like, I
mm-hmm.
mean, the Captain Marvel stuff was doing gangbusters traffic wise, but I was
Yeah,
like,
then they
no,
got to
man,
protect her butt.
I
What
can't see
butt she had.
this. And then I talked to actually, I don't think he would mind me saying this. I was talking to Weaponized Nerd Rage,
Yep, go
and
right ahead.
he basically gave me the entire rundown of the entire movie. He called me up on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and we just talked about it for like an hour or something, and he told me everything about it.
Yep, I understand, and especially with him. And I say this was a case where the leaks that people had, but the ending especially, were better than what we got. Where they had to be, Judd Law with a super scroll and all that. That would have been so much better and salvaged the whole movie. That would have salvaged the whole movie if we actually had a bad guy for her to hit. Even if she curb stomped him, he still at least gave her a bit of a fight. At least we
Right.
would have had that, as opposed to, come on now, boom.
Yeah, I was on the fence about seeing it, and then when I heard about the "I'm Just a Girl" sort of song, the
Uh,
Gwen Stefani stuff playing during the climax, and then she didn't even like mess any of her hair up and all that.
nope. And then the CGI was atrocious.
I heard about that as well. So I was like, okay, I
Uh,
can't do this. I can't.
but again, no, I still say Sword of Dark World was still more entertaining. And Captain Marvel was still more entertaining than Sword of Dark World in my eyes. Still,
Interesting.
that's where I stand. Controversial though that may be, but I also say that it's just where they're going. I mean, there's one case of them changing a character entirely that I can accept because it's not the character, and that's MJ in the Spider-Man movies because it's not Mary Jane. And I think even Fahey knew we cannot have a non-redhead as Mary Jane. There's no way, absolutely no way we could do that. So instead, but we want to still replace character and have it be all white. So why don't we just come up with a new character with the same initials? That I can accept because we can still bring in Mary Jane whenever we want.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, I totally get why people are angry over it, but
Yeah, but people
for,
say that, but they will also say in other cases when people say, "Why change a character? Why not make a new character?" They made a new character. People are still complaining because she's filling the archetype. Make up your mind, guys.
yeah, the only thing that I mean, if I was going to make a stink about it, it feels like it's just shoving it in your face and twisting the
Mm-hmm.
knife when you call her MJ, even if
Right.
it's not like Mary Jane. It's just like, look what we're doing, and you can't do anything about it, or
Okay,
like just
that's true.
if they called her like I don't even care, just another name, whatever. It really wouldn't, like, if her name was,
MG.
yeah, I don't know, whatever. Then it would be like, okay, whatever. It's just another universe and
Yep.
fine. But
Yep.
yeah, I just felt with the MJ thing, it was a little bit like the Amy Pascals and people like that, sort of just like twist, like rubbing your nose in it a little bit.
True, but like I said, though, so long as you still have Mary Jane and in the wings that they could bring in whenever they want, I'm fine with that. I can still say one day, but at least tells you right then and there they didn't try to say, "Oh yeah, Mary Jane doesn't." We still have a possible ginger out there. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Seriously,
Exactly.
what is with their hatred for gingers?
See, actually, I'm looking at your comment section real quick. Eric Breen says, "Am I the only person who will admit that they liked Thor: Dark World?"
Eric, you can like Thor: The Dark World. That's perfectly fine. I did not. I personally did not. But
I didn't have a
yeah,
problem with it. It was one of those things where it was like a just almost like a bridge to the next Marvel movie or whatever, and it was like,
yeah,
okay, they didn't screw it up. It wasn't bad to me, but it wasn't like I was gonna write home about it.
exactly. I won't argue that, but I will say this: I will still say I thought Suicide Squad was more entertaining than Thor.
Suicide Squad was
Entertaining,
one of those
entertaining,
where
not good. Entertaining, not good. Entertaining.
I felt as if that, like, I'm trying to remember properly, but it felt like the first like 40% of the movie I thought was like really cool, and then it kind of went off the rails.
They had the parts where they had to rework everything because they changed Batman v Superman.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like remember. I don't know all of it, but I was just like, something weird happened like midway through the movie where there were
Yeah,
things that were just like disjointed. But I felt as though there was a lot of creativity put into the movie.
a lot more than you could say for Birds of Prey, right?
There you go.
I know of Nerdette. I don't know if you're listening, but yeah, Birds of Prey. Good lord, talk about an in name only. The movie is what I call it. I mean, have you kept up to date on Birds of Prey at all?
I have not. I
They're making Black Man. Do you know how much of the Batman cast do you know about? Like, from any games or anything?
The Batman cast?
Yeah, like Black Mask, Huntress,
Yeah, yeah,
Harley.
yeah.
Well, Black Mask, he's gay. But not only is he gay, he's flamboyantly gay and in a relationship with Mr. Zaz.
Yeah, I did. I will see random articles like that, but it's one of
Yeah.
those things where I don't do videos on it because I know that my knowledge of the DC universe is just very limited, and I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to fall on my face and people say like,
Oh,
you
I
don't know what you're
understand.
talking about.
Oh yeah,
Um,
like some people want to know Star Wars stuff, but they don't want to say anything because they don't know what he's saying. They don't want to be like, I'm not. I don't want to be a poser.
right, basically.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I get exactly what you're saying, but I'll just tell you that trust me, there's a reason why a lot of that rage is real because it's like, okay, Suicide Squad felt much more faithful than what you're doing, lady. It's like I'll say this: Elizabeth Banks, Charlie's Angels feels more faithful to their source material than Birds of Prey is.
Ouch.
Yeah, because at least with Charlie's Angels, you still have three girls. You still have Charlie, although there's a rumor saying that apparently that's just a voice modulator and that Charlie's still a woman. And that's the rumor I've heard. But it still on the surface looks like it. Whereas Birds of Prey, you got Harley, she's not a bird. And then you have these on the surface, the Birds of Prey characters, but it's all about Harley Quinn and Margot Robbie's big ego trip and wokeness.
Right.
Uh, ay, ay, ay. But sorry, I'm rambling a lot by this point.
No, no, you're educating me, so I appreciate it.
Oh, and, all right, all right. But now here's one thing though. What would you say is the movie that you would say is your standard for a comic book adaptation?
Ooh, that's a good. So again, I'm always pretty biased, but I think that first the Raimi Spider-Man movie, when I saw that, I just I love that
That's your
movie.
standard.
Even
Yep.
with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Green Goblin, I will forgive that. I saw like some concept art for the initial costume that was
Oh yeah, and
better.
makeup test too.
Yeah, yeah. There was like stuff that was like, why would you not do that? That was really good. But
Who
the,
knows?
in terms of capturing like the heart and feel and soul of what I felt like a Spider-Man movie should be, that first Spidey movie, it holds a special place in my heart.
Oh, not the second one. Most people go for the second
I
one.
really like the. Oh, the second one's very good too. But maybe there's a part of me that just because I had been waiting for so long. I mean,
hmm
young people, they don't understand what it's like to live in a world where the, there's not that many comic book movies that come
I
out.
know, I know. I'm 34. I'm 34, so I know.
So yeah, so that the first two Spidey movies are really classic, and I actually, I and again maybe because it's my youth or whatever, but the first Tim Burton Batman flick,
Oh,
I'll always love that movie.
yep. I never saw that in theaters for obvious reasons. I still enjoy those movies, and yeah, especially the very first one, Batman Returns. I more appreciate that now as an adult than I did as a kid, and gotta love Superman, at least the very first one, and
Right, right.
yeah, I just feel like there's just been so much, and then, but yeah, I agree though. Raimi Spider Man was one of the first ones to do things right again,
hmm
especially after you had Steel and all that.
And actually, this may sound weird, but the first Blade movie,
Oh
when I
yeah,
when that came out, especially that opening scene with the
I know the
blood
blood,
and
the blood, and all that.
the
Yeah,
club and everything. And when that movie came out, I just thought that was super super cool. Even though looking back, some of the special effects were kind of ridiculous,
yeah,
but overall, like the feel of the movie of what I wanted like a Blade movie to be, I thought it was really cool when it came out. I think it was like 98, maybe 90.
thereabouts. It was right before Spider Man. I definitely
Right,
remember that. But although to be fair though, with Blade though, they had to change the character quite a bit though for it to work.
right, right,
Like if I remember right, he was not a Domphir or whatever, part vampire originally. That was something that they retconned.
right.
But yeah, I guess, and like I said though, I think I personally feel that comic books are, at least in the case of Marvel, starting to make a slow incline, on the way up. Probably too little, too late. And I definitely think that comics, as we know them, are at a standstill at the very least. Maybe on a slow decline, but I don't think it's nosediving as bad as people think. Personally, that's just my opinion. And I personally think that books like yours and everyone else's are a good way to at least get people going. Do I think it's going to save the comic book industry? No. I personally, this is just my own opinion, honest opinion. I don't think it's Comicsgate and all that's going to save it, but I think it's definitely going to give, like, when basically, look at it this way. If the bombs are dropping on the comic industry, Comicsgate's going to be the bunkers for people to be able to be in and have a good time.
Right, and especially with the distribution problem, if that could be solved, if you could get
Yeah.
that's so my thing has always been my long-term goal. I want to keep doing stories,
hmm
but keep getting that price point lower and lower, and then have the quality of the books get better and better. And that way, like you said, it's the fallback area for people that are just like, okay, well, we can't deal with what's going on in the mainstream industry, but these independent books, we could get them out to more and more and more people. um, it'll just naturally create its own sort of comic book ecosystem or something.
Exactly. And I'll tell you this, just hearing from Nerdet's interview with your boy Zach earlier, he was just mentioning how, given how big of a hit that Jawbreakers was, that's allowed him to actually, like, originally he had like a certain number of stores and that would have been it, but then Jawbreakers was such a big hit that's been able to help him pay off and working on the upcoming books that he's working on. Basically, he feels like he now has a bit of a rhythm now he could do that for, and who knows, maybe it was your stuff. If it still keeps on going up, and with the amount you're getting, you'll probably be able to keep this going and have one pay for the next one and for the next one.
Right, ideally, and maybe eventually on a long enough timeline, I would like to just concentrate on writing, because it's really tough to do when you have a full-time job, but then you're also trying to campaign and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff. It's like basically right now I have essentially two full-time jobs for
Mm-hmm.
60 days, and
Ugh.
it's exhausting. We'll just put it
I
that way.
bet I can imagine. Well,
So.
we're coming up in an hour right now, and I think I'm already running dry on things to talk about. So it was great having you on, Doug. I think that's a good place to end it right here. And just give anyone else a shout out where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I'm on YouTube, obviously. I actually have a new BitChute channel as well that I just started the other day. That's my backup for YouTube. I'm on Twitter. I've got a blog, and you just keep searching douglasernst.blog, Douglas Ernst on Twitter, and then obviously my YouTube channel as well. And then the Indiegogo is, of course, Soulfinder Demons Match, my project with Timothy Lim and Brett R. Smith.
All right. It was great having you here, and thank you very much. I hope, and you've already reached the goal, obviously, and you're going well beyond it. I hope great. I will back it as soon as I can. I promise you. My own money's been tight lately, so I will still take care of it. And thank everyone for joining in, and thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.